Excerpts from A Wedding in Provence by Ellen Sussman. They drove along the coast from Nice, headed west, away from the high-rise apartment buildings and overdeveloped hillsides, away from the auto route that scared Nell with its fast cars and unintelligible signs. She found the slow road to Cassis, one that hugged the Mediterranean, one that kept them inching slowly toward her family. She had sobered up. He was still appealing in a rough-around-the-edges way, but now the notion of introducing him to her mother seemed ludicrous. She could lie about when and how they met, but then he would know she was not the daring woman she had presented herself to be. Story of her life, creating a fantasy and then crashing into it full force with her own dumb reality. You can't take a total stranger to your mother's wedding. And you can't fall in love on an airplane. Who said anything about love? Wasn't she just anticipating one or two wild nights in bed? And then he would go on with his grand adventure, exploring the coast, however the hell he planned on doing that in the first place. She hadn't slept with anyone since Cheney. "I fell asleep," he mumbled, stirring, adjusting his glasses, clearing his throat. Then his hand reached out and stroked the back of her neck. "We should have slept on the plane," she said. "No," he said. "We were having far too much fun for that." She smiled. He pressed his fingers into the nape of her neck and she felt a flush course through her body. This will be fine, she told herself. Her mother will be too occupied with everything else to care about one extra person at the wedding. One stranger. "Where are you from?" she asked. "You're worried about introducing me to your mother." She shot him a look. Mind reader. He was smiling, a devilish smile. "Not at all," she said. "My mother has a weakness for good-looking men." "And you? Do you do this often? Take strangers to my mother's wedding?" "Not often." "So now I'm strange." "Very." "I'm from Seattle." He was lying. He wore a black t-shirt and skinny black jeans. He carried a leather bomber jacket and wore black Doc Martens. New York, maybe. LA. This guy was not from Seattle. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Oh, not a thing," she said. "I love Seattle." She hated Seattle. She hated the rain, the sincerity, everyone's outdoorsiness. She once spent a month in Seattle with a boyfriend and fled the place, leaving her rain gear behind. A burst of nervous laughter escaped her. "What's so funny?" he asked. "What did we talk about all those hours on the plane? We know nothing about each other." "Are you worried?" "No," she said quickly. "Neither am I," he told her. He placed his hand on her thigh, and even through the material of her jeans, she felt as if he was pressing the flesh of his palm into her skin. Her body temperature rose. She threw the map on his lap. "Help me find Cassis," she said. "We'll tell each other the stories of our lives later on, in bed." "I like that," he said. He was good at maps. He directed her left and right, through small fishing villages and larger vacation communities. When they were stopped at a light in the center of one town, he jumped out of the car, and for a moment she thought, "He's gone." Her heart lurched. She wanted him back, and she wanted him gone forever. She wanted to sleep with him and fall in love with him, and yet she didn't want to bring him to the damn wedding. And then she conjured the worst of what would happen. Her younger sister, Carly. Practical, rational, reasonable Carly would kill her. She pulled to the side of the road, then looked in the back seat. His backpack was there, piled on top of her suitcase. They hadn't been able to open the trunk. The car door opened again and he climbed in, bearing ice cream cones. She felt ridiculously happy, like a child, like a lover, like a woman who knew the man behind the cones. pistachio?" she asked. He smiled. His own cone held chocolate ice cream. Had he given her chocolate ice cream, she might have sent him on his way. Instead, she had fallen in a little deeper. In love? In lust. She was a fool, but at least she was a fool with a cone full of pistachio ice cream. "It's hot in here," he told her. "I needed to cool off." The air conditioner was broken. Or was he talking about the heat between them? She pressed her legs together. She ate her ice cream and watched a mother try to maneuver a double stroller across the busy street, a boy hanging onto her skirt, delinquent dad following a few steps behind, his eyes focused on a cell phone. Through the open car window, she could hear one baby wailing, the boy yelling, the mother trying to soothe him. "That woman is probably my age," Nell said. "You didn't leave a husband and 3 kids behind in Los Angeles?" Gavin asked. "I didn't even leave a job behind." "A boyfriend?" She looked at him. He had a smudge of chocolate at the edge of his lip. "Just so you know," she said, "I don't like chocolate ice cream. I love all things chocolate except for ice cream." "I knew that," he said, smiling. "And I don't have a boyfriend. The last one killed himself in our bedroom. I'm still working on the aftermath of that one." "I'm sorry," Gavin said. "I can't imagine." She saw tenderness on his face, something new, something that made her open her heart a little more. Good response, Nell thought. She hated the friends who told her it wasn't her fault, or the folks who had tried to top her with horror stories of bad relationships. It hadn't even been a bad relationship. It had been wonderful, except for the suicide part. Cheney had died 6 months earlier, and she had moved out of the apartment the day she found him lying in bed, bottles of pills, many of them her pills, strewn across the sheets. You have a family and kids back home?" she asked. He shook his head. "Tell me about the boyfriend." She raised her eyebrows. Brave man. So she told him that she and Cheney had been living together for a year, having met at an audition. Both of them were actors. They read well together, got turned down, went for beers at the nearby pub. She didn't mention that she moved in with him the night they met, or that she had left behind a different boyfriend in a fancier apartment, one who waited for her for days to return. She finally moved her things out of the old place when he was at work. She left him a Dear John letter, a pathetic excuse for a note. The old guy, and he was old, 45 to her 27, had 2 kids, a miserable divorce, a high-stress job, a drinking problem. Cheney seemed so easy to her. She felt like a kid again with him, carefree and broke, free to have sex whenever they wanted. Even her mother liked Cheney, especially after she saw him in True West at a small LA theater. In the weeks before his suicide, he had been called back 3 times for a breakout role in a film, and finally his agent told him by voicemail that he hadn't gotten the role. He killed himself a few hours later. Had he wanted that role so much that he couldn't live without it? Maybe she had been missing something while having fun with Cheney. Maybe he wasn't so easy after all. But she didn't tell Gavin that. She told him about finding out that he was bipolar, something he had never revealed. His mom told her at the funeral. "Oh, I know," she had lied to the woman, "but he was doing so well." Now she rented a room in someone's broken-down house in Venice. She had a bit part every once in a while in a cop show on TV. She was studying to be a yoga teacher. So was everyone else. A horn blasted and her hands flew to the steering wheel. She and Gavin were sitting in the car at the side of the road in some small beach town in France. They had finished their ice cream cones long before. She reached over and wiped the chocolate at the side of Gavin's mouth. "Thank you," he said, "for telling me all that." She nodded. "Okay, time to bring the stranger to the wedding." "We're here," she said, leaning over and pointing to a spot on the map that sat on the gear shift between them. "This is Cassis. Lead me to my mother." She pulled back onto the road. Her eyes were tired. She hadn't slept in a day or two. She shifted gears and then hooked a finger under the sleeve of Gavin's t-shirt. She pulled him toward her and felt his mouth on her ear. Soft lips, hot breath. For the first time in a long while, she felt something like happiness spread through her. Her mom was marrying a cowboy. No, he wasn't a cowboy. Carly knew that. He had been some kind of veterinarian in bumfuck Wyoming. But then he gave it all up to move to San Francisco and live with Olivia. Carly didn't trust him. She didn't know him, despite having shared a couple of dinners with him and her newly smitten mother. He was a Wyoming man, a tall hunk of a guy. Carly knew nerds and geeks and men like her father, thinking men. She understood those men, even if they made her crazy. Wes made her crazy. "You're still dreaming that your mother and father will get back together," Wes had said to her when they received the wedding invitation. Couldn't her mother have just told her in person, rather than some moronic e-card with champagne glasses as the subject line? "I am not," she protested. But the next day, when she gently told her dad that Olivia was getting married, she saw him crumble just a little bit. He was not a man who crumbled. "Good for her," he said, almost to himself. They were sitting in a restaurant in Woodside. Just a few minutes earlier, a couple of men had stopped by their table to tell him how much they admired him. He was top dog at Silicon Valley's most powerful law firm. Everyone admired him. Carly's mother admired a cowboy. "The wedding's in France," Carly said, knowing that, too, would pain her father. He and Olivia used to vacation in Paris often, just the two of them. Carly had always loved the idea of it, her parents wandering the streets of Paris, hand in hand, discovering unknown bistros, hidden parks, quirky museums. They'd show her the photo albums later, and Carly would imagine herself as an adult, traveling to Paris with her husband, bringing home jacquardie dresses for her own young daughters. Why was her mother marrying this guy in France? Why didn't her father show some grit? He must still love her, despite the young women he dated now, stupid women who couldn't hold their own in an argument with him. Maybe he was tired of arguing. Carly was tired of the voices in her head, all of them clamoring to make sense of nothing. Marriages end. Someone says I quit. Where was her own grit? "Oui, mademoiselle," the waiter said, as if they were in the middle of a conversation. Champagne, s'il vous plaît," she requested, surprising herself. She'd been pining for a beer. The dancing champagne glasses from that idiotic e-card must have penetrated her psyche. Well, bring on the champagne. She'd find something to celebrate. The waiter disappeared, and a man dropped into the seat across from her. Olivia stepped out of her bathrobe and stepped into the pool. "It's still warm," she said quietly, and then she dove underwater. She swam the length of the pool to loosen up, stretching her arms for a long, strong crawl. When she touched the wall, she turned and swam back. "Come in," she said, placing her hands on Brody's feet. He dropped his robe beside hers and dove into the pool. They were both naked in the dark night. Even the moon didn't penetrate the clouds. It was 2 a.m. Neither of them could sleep. "That feels great," Brody said, emerging at the other end of the pool. "Shh," Olivia said, swimming toward him. "We don't want company." They both looked toward the inn. All the windows were dark. Even Ulysse, who eyed them wearily at the back door, had been too tired to follow them out to the pool. The night air was filled with the scent of lavender. "That's the good thing about being in our 50s, Brody said. "No one's really dying to see us naked anymore." "They don't know what they're missing." Olivia wrapped her arms around Brody's waist. "Are you happy to be here?" she asked, pulling him toward her. "Yes," he said, "very." "Your mother seems to be doing all right." "Yeah, she puts on a good front, Wyoming stoicism and all that." "Poor thing." Brody leaned over and kissed the side of Olivia's head. "I can't imagine losing you after a year," she said. "Imagine 55 years." "Of a good marriage," Brody added. Olivia looked at him, his face lit by the moon, now spreading light through the thinning clouds. She reached up and touched his face. "I want to grow old with you." "Let's stay young instead," he said, taking her hand in his. She thought of his mother, alone in her room at the inn. Sam should be here, sleeping at her side. Wes should be here, sleeping at Carly's side. Sebastian should be here, sleeping at Emily's side, instead of in the pool house where she saw him slink off after the dishes were done. Love gone awry. "There's one thing I want to be sure of," Olivia said. "What's that?" "Let's not lose this. Us, in the middle of all the commotion. Let's stay just this close." "And naked?" "Very naked." "I like this," Brody said. "It does feel as if we're the only ones here." "What did you do for your first wedding?" Olivia asked. As soon as the words escaped her mouth, she wanted to retract them. Verboten territory. Do not enter. "This isn't the time," Brody said, releasing her hand. Already his voice was different, as if he were talking to a woman he didn't like very much. "Well, I'm curious," Olivia said. "That's all. You never told me about your wedding." She couldn't stop herself. It would be so much smarter to change the subject. But there was something so unreasonable about Brody's refusal to talk about his first marriage all the time. But that's just it. His marriage wasn't a disaster. It was wonderful. It was perfect. And then his wife died. No way Olivia could ever compete with a dead woman.